Hello, Facebook. Thank you guys for tuning in. It is Friday, beautiful Memorial Day weekend in Portland, Oregon. And a lot of you have been excited about the next person I'm going to be talking to. This gentleman has been somebody that has not only influenced me in a really positive way, he's impacted so many people in the Northwest in supporting music education, providing you with the soundtrack of your life. And so we've got a lot of ground to cover. So I'd love for you to say hi to my dear friend, Terry Currier.
Hello there, Kevin. Hello, everybody out there.
We were just talking about his quarantine haircut. So how long has it been since you had a haircut, buddy?
It's been about 2.5 months. I'm hoping to get in there sometime in June. I've had to trim my bangs, a couple different times.
Do you have a stylist that you go to every time?
Oh, yeah. Her name's Denise McMillan.
Okay. You can't trade Denise in a little bit of vinyl and have her come into the shop and wear a mask?
Yeah.
It's tough to do some social distancing when they're doing haircuts. I know. That's why I wear hats.
Hey, it's a new frontier out there.
Yeah, it is. It is, man. I was talking a little bit about your connection to the community, and I will mention, I think you and I have known each other for quite a while, but I think the involvement.
We've got to work together.
We did, and I would love to cover some of that because we had an amazing tenure with the Oregon Music Hall of Fame. You as the director, and me as a fledgling, just a board member, but
more than just a board member.
Well, I hung on for dear life, and it was for me, I think the biggest part of that was the involvement in music education, and something that people might not really know about Terry. We've got your history with Music Millennium and your involvement in music for a long time, but there's a lot of stuff that you've given back, both in providing scholarships for students and the Music in the Schools program, and also even just what you've done to support this community as like Record Store Day, Music Millennium Day, take your kid to Music Millennium Day. There's so much that you've done for people. And I just don't want to get to the end of this conversation without just saying, it's a thankless job in a big way. I know that you've busted your ass for decades in this industry, and I'm grateful that you're still there, man. I know that it seems to me like, every wave of new adversity that comes your way, you're like, hey, what else do you need to have just sort of slap you in the face to try and make your business struggle? But you've done it. You're weathering the storm. So let's talk a little bit about what got you into the business in the first place. And then let's just talk about ways that we can share as a community to give back. So give me your history in music.
Well, I grew up, I wasn't listening to the radio and I wasn't listening to records. I played clarinet. My goal was to go to college on music scholarships and either play in an orchestra or be a school music teacher. I was very narrow-minded at that time. I didn't think that, oh, you know what? I could go start my own band. It was just all about learning how to play this clarinet, learning music theory, doing all these things, going to college, and that was it. When I was 16 years old, my dad asked me if I was going to get a car, and I said, no, I'm going to get a motorcycle. So I got a motorcycle for about 9 months, and in the Northwest where it rains, snows, sleet, motorcycle was not a good idea. And so I got a car. And when I got that car, I started listening to the radio. There was 2 stations in Portland that I gravitated to. One was Kissin' and one was K-Van. K-Van probably had the biggest impact on me. They were underground AM station. Some of the Portland premier disc jockeys started at K-Van. When I was listening to it, Gloria Johnson, Bob Anchetta were on there. Iris Hamilton, Iris Harrison.
There you go. Yeah, she's watching right now. I know.
Sheila Hamilton. Yeah, Iris Harrison. She was on there. But I started listening to the radio, and 3 months later, I went to see my first concert, which was Leon Russell and the Shelter People at the Memorial Coliseum. It
Wow.
was like the week after I turned 17. Record store at the soon to be open Jansen Beach Shopping Center.
Wow.
Um, I pretty much told them I didn't know a whole lot about music, so they knew that up front, but they could see I had an enthusiasm for music, and they gave me a chance, and it was the biggest break in my life. Uh,
To that point.
to that point,
Yeah.
and when I got to January of that year, my school counselors were all over my case because I hadn't filled out my scholarship applications at all. And I said, well, I'm 17 years old. I'm now assistant manager of a record store making $2.25 an hour. It doesn't get any better than this.
Yeah. Set your sights high, baby.
Yep. And I haven't turned back. I mean, this coming September will be 48 years of doing this.
God, man. Wow. That's incredible. For your 50th, do you have plans about how you're going to celebrate your 50th year in music?
It'll probably go by just like my 50th birthday. It's just another day, you know. Um, it's, I do what I do. I love what I do. And I guess that's why I do what I do. It has something to do with music, and it can help our music community here, my industry that I'm in. It's pretty easy for me to just raise my hand and goes, let's do this. Let's get this done. It needs to happen.
It's amazing to me that you got the energy. Honestly, you've probably had people ask you this before, but you, man, I just think about all of the coalitions that you're part of, right? So the Independent Record Store Coalition, and you've got all these organizations that you work with. So many of these things are nonprofits and they're volunteer based. So you obviously have a love for the music, and I think probably an interest in trying to keep this thing going. Um, as an aside, it's interesting because for your friends, I know that you manage this death list, right? Or the dead list. I don't know how you call it, but
Yeah, I got this death list, Uh, there was a time when, when anybody passed away of note that was an artist in the industry, people would gravitate towards the store. They'd want to get an Elvis Presley record. They'd, want to get a Sid Vicious record, whatever it might be. And so I started sharing when people passed away with other record stores, because it gave them an opportunity to get that product, get it into their store, take care of their customers before the distributors ran out. And people started finding out about it. And I think there's about 150 people on the death list. Most of them aren't in the industry anymore, but they still like to follow. And it's unfortunate sometimes, we have to talk about friends that we lose in this group. But it's also been an educational thing for a lot of people too, because there's a lot of obscure people in here that people go, wow, I didn't know about that. And then there's those facts about people that, wow, I didn't know about that fact.
Yeah, you kind of honor those people as they pass, and when you first put me on the list, to check it out, it was freaking me out because I started thinking, oh man, that's a lot of negativity to get hit with. But if you look at it a different way, like you just said, you can honor these people with a reflection on their contribution to music or the contribution to the industry. The reason I brought up that list was because I noticed that it started adding record stores to it, as notable record stores would go under, they were added to the death list. And I would imagine that hits you probably harder than most artists, right? When you see
it's a hard thing to see any record store go out of business. I mean, there was a time in the industry where there were so many record stores, and people would ask you, who's your competitor, and just out of survival, what's going on in your marketplace, how many record stores are in your marketplace. And, there was times when, some people will refer to the bigger national retailers like Tower as, they must be the enemy.
Right.
But when it's in like 2006, 2007, it was one of the saddest moments for many independent retailers out there. It wasn't like, oh, now we're going to get Tower's business. It was like a whole bunch of record stores just went out of business, and this isn't a good thing.
Right.
Today, yeah, I don't know, there's probably around 2,500 record stores or more. Um, uh, In 2007, there was only 1,800 record stores. So there's a lot more record stores that have sprouted up over the last 13 years. But things like this virus right now
Right.
is putting a lot of record stores under.
Again, right?
Again,
Yeah, I know. It's like the universe saying, "Here, hold my beer. Here's another speed bump to run over." Right?
yeah. And it's sad, because um, you know, some towns don't have a record store anymore.
Right.
And, that, you know, record stores were part of my life once I got into working in a record store. It wasn't just about the record store I worked in. It was like, oh, wow, there's all these record stores, And so, you go on vacation, you go on a business trip. The first thing you did back there in the 70s and 80s was go to a phone booth, get the phone book, and look for the record stores.
Oh,
And
yeah.
one thing I always noticed in that was about every other phone book had the record stores pages torn out of the book. So somebody looked
Yeah,
for them before you
that's
did.
right. They jumped ahead. Man, there was a magic to that thing. You've talked about this before about music stores becoming a community center, right? And they really are. When I think about growing up in Montana, and you and I have talked about Cactus Records in Bozeman, Montana.
Oh, yeah.
And man, I spent all day in there on weekends, and something about the smell and the incense or the different smells, candles or whatever, and just the other sort of merch and the swag that would go along with the vinyl, right? You'd be digging through posters, and you'd look at buttons and pins and stickers, and then talking to the people that worked in the record store that had so much passion about music. And man, you've got this enthusiasm for music. One thing that people that I've introduced to you are remarkable, or they're amazed by, is that if somebody comes into town that I want to meet you, we'll call up the store, see if you're in town, and you'll take time out of your day to come down from the office and introduce yourself and talk to these guys about the music they're into, and if they've not been to Portland or they're not familiar with the area, you'll take time to converse and communicate with them as a friend, and so it's the same kind of energy that you can get from people that know about the music, but you want to know more about that personality. And I think you've kept that spirit alive when that's really rare to find anywhere, but your staff is groomed that way. You sort of like encourage them to be really involved in recommendations. And
We're, if you've ever seen the movie High Fidelity, we use that as an example of not to be that kind of clerk in a record store.
Right.
We believe that, and especially myself, that there's all this music out there, and not everybody's going to like everything. But when somebody comes in the store and looks for something, whether you like it or not, your job is to help them find the best kind of music they can in that genre, or the best kind of music by a particular artist. You might not like Barry Manilow, or you might not have a lot of respect for Barry Manilow, but Barry Manilow is a worthy artist, and your job is to help find that customer the best Barry Manilow piece of music that they can pick up and take with them. We 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 kind of pride our store in being kind of an entertainment center. Um, you know, um, when people come to the store, you want to turn them on to things they maybe never heard of in ever in
Yeah.
their life. Uh, you want them to go home, and then when they throw that record on the turntable or that CD in the CD player, and they're listening to it, they're kind of going, "Wow, this is really great."
Yeah.
And we have a lot of customers that will gravitate towards individual employees in the store because they know that employee got that rapport with them, kind of understands what they're looking for, and they want more wow moments.
Yeah. You you know, it's a relationship, right? I mean, you're building this relationship with people, and that connection you might have with the clerk is about trust, right? So if somebody has recommended something that uh, you've taken home and you have those wow moments and you think, oh man, this guy, they've got my back, it wasn't that I was trying to be, I was being upsold at all. It was
Yeah.
the genuine interest in finding them the right product. I worked for one of those big chain stores when I first moved to Portland. I had worked for Hastings back in Montana. So,
Yeah.
so it was an easy thing to just jump into one of the mall music stores when I first moved here. And the band that I played with for many years, On Alama, which you guys really helped promote and carry a lot of our music, we had these listening stations right in that mall music store. And of course, we were supposed to have the biggest artists of that time in the listening centers. People would put the headphones on, and they had like 6 listening centers where they could hear the newest Garth Brooks and the newest Alanis Morissette had just come out at that point, so the big artists. And I loved being a system manager. I had the keys to the listening center, so when people would get turned on to Alanis Morissette, I'd swap out one of the other discs, and way against the rules, but I put Analama CDs in there. And I said, you know what, man, if you like this, check this out. Right. And they were into like Garbage and Belly and all these other artists that I knew would pair to move over to them. And it was completely unethical to do for this small chain music store. But, I got to promote the heck out of my band.
Well, Analama was a great band, and so you were doing those people a great service.
People still talk about it. And what I would normally tell people is like, yeah, we don't carry it here, but go to Music Millennium and pick it up, And the stores that supported us, independent bands like that, you've always been that kind of store. Bands, not only independent bands that hadn't been signed, but you've taken national acts and you'll do in-store performances. I knew that you used to do a lot of that at your Northwest 23rd store. And then when you started doing that also in the Burnside store, you've got this tiny balcony and people could pack into your store, and you've had huge international bands in there, right? So for the first time that somebody might see one of these international artists, you could see it right there in the balcony at Music Millennium.
We've done about 4,500 live in-store appearances between the two stores. In 1989, at the Burnside store, it was our 20th anniversary, and I was trying to think of something to do for the 20th anniversary. And I turned to the then majority owner, Don McLeod, and I go, why don't we have 20 straight days of live music? And we had done a few bands in the aisles before, and he goes, well, where are you going to do this? And I pointed upstairs, and he goes, well, maybe that would work. And so we went to rent a sound system, and since we needed it for 20 days, we looked at the cost of that versus buying a system, and we went ahead and bought a system, and we ended up doing 40 straight days of live music,
Oh my God.
mostly local bands at that point. And we kept thinking that, maybe one of these national bands will come through someday and we'll get to have them on a stage. And then I started getting on the telephone and calling record labels and managers and going, hey, how about your band come play our store when they come through town? Well, let me check. And so, I mean, 1989 alone, a couple of the most memorable in-stores we ever had. We had Soundgarden here
Oh
on
my God.
street date of Louder Than Love.
Oh
We had Randy Newman here singing happy birthday to us on our 20th anniversary. I
my
mean,
God.
I'm, I'll pinch myself is going, is this real?
Yeah.
Today, just a couple hours ago, I was watching a Steve Earle performance on the internet um, because the last 5 records that Steve's put out, he's flown here from New York just to play Music Millennium on the week of release. And
Wow.
he would have done it again this album hadn't it been for the virus. So what he decided, he's always done about 4 or 5 different record stores with each album. He decided to do a live broadcast on Facebook that everybody could see, and was a pretty special
Wow.
event.
Man, it doesn't surprise me. It's funny because record labels would normally solicit, it's like people in stores to pick them up, do radio junkets and that kind of thing. But you've helped break bands. Ever since I've met you, you've been such a supporter of community and these independent bands. When we started working together in Oregon Music Hall of Fame, I love that when you guys came to me, you've been involved in providing this recognition for bands that contributed in, sort of in a global way, because there's such a history in Oregon music, right? And so it was
Yeah,
great that you had that first induction ceremony where you collected all these bands that had been sort of inducted over time, brought them together and had this ceremony to honor them. And then during that time where you had to have induction ceremonies and finding ways to keep Oregon Music Hall of Fame involved in the community, you would also have these local businesses like a local Burgerville or one of these local shops to support live music. You'd have a performance with independent bands that wanted to contribute to the Music Education Fund and the Music in the Schools program. But I don't know any other place that is so involved in the community like that. And it's not just related to Music Millennium. This is all about you trying to give back. And I love the fact that right now, as people are stuck at home and they're reflecting on changes in their life, things that they have to make different because of the fallout of the pandemic,
yeah,
there are a lot of people right now that are in this crisis mode where they're just holding on for dear life and they're looking at ways to just hang on by a thread on their own. But since I've known you, you've been the kind of guy that has hung on by a thread, but you're always looking at ways to be able to give back. And it's an important thing, because I believe in sort of paying it forward and karma. And man, where did you get the sense of community? I mean, have you always been this way, or your parents raised you this way?
yeah. It's just kind of been part of me, and it especially gave me the opportunity when I came to Music Millennium. You know, my philosophy has always been to support local artists and local causes. Um, and I can remember talking with Don McLeod when he hired me. I go, um, the community has supported Music Millennium for 15 years at that point in time. It's important that we support the community, and we would support as many causes as we possibly could. Um, right now I'm sitting here going, well, for the last 2.5 months, I've been doing about 30% of the business that I've been doing before, doing curbside and mail order. At the same time, I wish that I was in a better financial situation to support the venues and the local artists that are in this town. I've reached out to a couple of the promoters and venues in town and told them when they get ready to get off the ground, let me know if there's anything I can do to help out. Next week, um, we are going to do an interesting thing here at the store. We're going to let one customer in per hour, and people are signing up for this. We announced it 2 nights ago. but they have to make a $25 minimum donation. And these donations are going to go to struggling artists out there that are having financial problems during the virus. The following week, if we can do it, we're going to have an hour in the evening because we're going to open up again on June 1st, and we'll be open 10 to 7. But from the 7 to 8 hour.
You just froze up for a second. Can you repeat that again? So on June 1st, you're opening.
Yeah, June 1st, we're going to reopen the store to the public. We're only going to be able to let in 10 people at a time. Everybody's going to have to wear a mask. We're going to be putting everybody in as safe a situation as we possibly can. But that week, we may go to a private shopping hour for a person or even a person and a friend. And any donation that they make will go to help some of the venues and the venue staffs in our town. I am so worried, especially for the promoters and the venues in this town, you know, and all I can do is hope that they'll all make it through this time, but the possibility is they might not make it. It may just be like what's happening to record stores across the United States that are being forced to close.
You know, okay, first of all, how do they sign up for some of these private sessions? So to be prior to you opening, the one person at a time, how do they sign up for that?
Well, they can call the store at 503-231-8926.
Okay.
Or they can send an email to music@musicmillennium.com.
Okay.
And pretty much we're starting it this Sunday, and Sunday and Monday are all full. Tuesday through the following Sunday, there are available times on most days.
I'll put that information in the recap. So on the post that we just have this live cast going, I'll edit that post and make sure that we've got phone number and music@musicmillennium.com that they can sign up for a slot. Get in there, make your donation, support Music Millennium for sure. Support these artists and the venues as well. There's so much that you've done. I'd love for people to be able to help out and give back. Right now, people are at home. They're ordering music online, right? You've been doing curbside for a while. So how do they do that? Do they call you and say, hey, I'm looking for this Prince vinyl. Can you grab one for me and I'll swing by and pick it up? Or do you have somebody?
Yeah, it's a lot like that. And it's been interesting because we've been operating with a much smaller staff. And the people that have been working out on the floor, they're busy all day long.
Wow.
You know, they're usually standing behind the counter or out on the floor talking with people about music or ringing them up or, you know, having conversations with them. But they're taking the phone and then, you know, somebody might give them 4 or 5 different things and it's in 4 or 5 different parts of the store. So they're getting a good exercise. There were one day I have this health app that's on my telephone that I never use, but I decided to take a look at it because it's on my phone. And one day, just in this building, I put 4 miles on just walking around the building. You know, that's a lot of moving because this isn't a huge building by any.
Yeah, but you're moving, you're hustling. You look great, by the way, too. I mean, you've endured a couple of health, issues over the last several years. And, ever since I've known you, you're one of the hardest working people I've ever met in my life. Right. So I get nervous because I know that you overwork yourself and you give a lot back.
Well, I try to take care of myself. When I turned 57, I started thinking of my dad. My dad had a stroke at 58 and died of a heart attack at 59. And I go, I'm not going that route. I have naturally high cholesterol and high blood pressure. And I go, I'm just not going to go that way. So I woke up one day and I go, you know, this is what I'm going to do going forward in my eating habits. And it was quite a remarkable feat the first year. Um, I just really changed the types of foods I put in my body. I was conscious of the portions and stuff, and my my body transformed. Uh, I lost like 40 pounds just like that in that first year, and it was supposed to be done with a lot of exercise, and I'm still not getting quite the exercise I need.
Sounds like
But
you are right
you know,
now.
I am
Your,
now.
your steps. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But you know, it's really important that people treat themselves well if they want to be around on the planet for a
Yeah.
while.
Well, the fact that you're having such an impact on people and businesses, we all need you around for a while. So I'm glad you're taking care of yourself. It's a good thing. Music Millennium was well, okay. Let's jump back a little bit to Oregon Music Hall of Fame. It didn't necessarily wasn't paired with the Oregon Music Hall of Fame, but at one point, Buck Munger had sort of been involved, right, in the formation of that.
Yeah, the 3 years before we were starting the Oregon Music Hall of Fame, Buck had been on me on a consistent basis to start up an organization that would recognize the legacy artists of our state. Uh, he had been involved with a thing called the Oregon Music Coalition. There was people like Dave Lycan involved in that organization. And they wanted to see that they wanted to see that vision go forward. And I kept saying, I'm involved in too many different organizations. I'm on too many boards. I don't have time to do this. And then one day I got a weak moment. It goes, yeah, I'm going to do this. But there had to be a different element to it than just recognizing the legacy artists of our state. And that's where the music education thing came in. And we in those first three meetings that we had at the Oregon Music Hall of Fame, we talked really heavily about music education, starting a scholarship program. Uh, one of the founding board members, Janine Rundle, she was uh, really excited about the educational part of the ideas of this organization, and she took a lot of that upon herself. I can remember the first time we gave a music scholarship. Now we just didn't have a lot of money,
Right.
and it was the board that had to raise any of the funds that were used to run the organization and give the scholarships. And I can remember going over to a high school and giving away our first scholarship of $500, and how exciting it felt.
Huge.
It
Yeah.
it felt huge. And um, over the next few years, we were able to give away like 4 $1,000 scholarships. And with the help of Mark Baker, who was a board member for a number of years, um, before he retired from the board, but his company, EPB&B Insurance, stepped up to the plate from the very beginning to sponsor our induction ceremony. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, he goes, I'm going to give you more sponsorship money, but I want all the sponsorship money to go to the scholarship fund.
Mm-hmm.
So we're able to give away 4 $2,000 scholarships every year at this point in time. And thank you, Mark Baker.
Yeah, big time. Really, I mean that there are so many people involved in that board over the years that, to me, yeah, it just it opened my eyes to be able the people that are able to give back, because as a volunteer, it takes a lot of time, a lot of energy, And you mentioned Janine, and maybe she was in there with you from the beginning, really. I know Mark Baker, and oh my gosh, like Bill Frith has been so involved for many
Oh,
years. And
he's great. We got Michael Kersey, who's on the board.
yeah, Tom
Uh,
Hunt.
so, some of the previous board members like Bill Wadhams,
Yeah,
uh,
Bill.
Penny Lane,
Yeah, that's right.
um, and yeah, Buck Munger was a beginning board member, um, and what kind of helped us, transition from some of the ideas that the Oregon Music Coalition had before into our own ideas. We didn't want to be the same organization. Um, what we've been able to do through this organization is we haven't grown as fast as we'd like to.
Yeah.
At We've had 13 induction ceremonies. We've been around since 2003, 2004 was our beginning years. By this point in time, we were going to have our own educational facility
Right.
and a museum.
Right.
But, the reality of it all is no, we don't have those things. But we've had some people in the community come forth and offer us situations. The Youth Music Project, which is based in West Lynn, it's a music facility for kids to go learn music after school.
Yeah.
They have 1,000 students over there. They have classrooms. You can learn a variety of different instruments. But they built onto their facility an extra 1,000 square feet and give us some space for a small museum out there. We have an interactive kiosk out there with all the inductees in the kiosk, information about them, and sound bites. There's a beautiful wall of stained glass plaques out there with all the inductees' names on there.
Oh, wow.
And we usually have a couple of display cases out there that focus on a couple of the inductees from the past.
That's so good. Yeah. People can go check out the Youth Music Project. It's right off the 10th Street exit in West Lynn. So if you go down, it's in the Willamette area, right off Willamette Falls Drive. So a little plug for YMP.
It's a beautiful building too.
It really is stunning. And they've got a performance hall in there that not only do the students sort of have an opportunity to have their graduation ceremonies and play in front of people after they've done education, but they get clinicians or musicians that come through too. And it really is a stunning venue. The sound system is amazing, and they've done it right. So I think
the sound system is absolutely one of the best sound systems you're going to hear in the state of Oregon.
That's the truth, man. I think, it's so funny to think about the collection you've done when these induction ceremonies would come in and we get the scholarship money from live auctions. And so a lot of those finances would come from guitar auctions, where you would go and you'd get these guitars signed from different artists, big national artists, and then they'd have this live auction for the induction ceremony. And you've got like some of the best stories about collecting the Chris Isaak guitar and getting the autograph.
Oh, the Chris Isaak guitar was pretty amazing. I took the guitar up to the zoo. He was playing one of the zoo concerts, and I'd take it backstage, and the production staff would usually give it to the road manager. Road manager would get it signed by the artist, and I'd go there after the show. They'd hand me the guitar. Well, I went backstage, and the guitar hadn't been signed, and so I'm tracking down the road manager. The road manager goes, I'll be with you in a little while. I got a few things to do here. And so when he came back, he went into this room. I just followed him on in there, and Chris Isaak was in there. And I walked up to Chris, and I go, we've done jail time together. and he looks at me with this, what are you talking about? And there was a time in the industry where this convention happened every year called the NARM convention. It was the main industry convention. It was in San Francisco. And in the good days of the record industry, the record distributors and labels had big budgets, and they had big budgets for entertainment. And WEA, which is Warner Electro Atlantic, rented out Alcatraz.
Oh my
And so we went over to Alcatraz for this event. And, you took a tour through Alcatraz, and you got to the jail cells in the end. And there was Stevie Nicks in a jail cell.
Oh,
and you could just
should
walk in and meet Stevie Nicks, get your picture taken with her. There was Chris Isaak. And somewhere around my house, I do have that photo. But the next jail cell was the one that was the most curious. They had the Olsen twins there. So
Mary Kate and
yeah.
Wow,
in
that
jail,
creepy.
little 13, 14-year-old teenage girls in a jail cell.
Oh my God! Like, keep them away from Chris. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm sure. No, that's not nice. Chris is a wonderful man.
So Chris started signing the guitar, and Chris was really artistic,
Yeah.
and he started drawing a picture of himself on the guitar, and he wrote the rules of the road on the back, and don't let the bass player drive, things like that, And then I turned to him again and I go, "Hey Chris, I stayed at your house one time." And he looks at me again in this real weird look, and I go, "Yeah, I came down to your house, you were out of town. I was down for the San Francisco Blues Festival, and this guy that I was with goes, 'Hey, I got a place where we can stay.' And it turned out to be Jimmy, Chris Isaac's guitar player for those early albums. He was also in a band called the Avengers down there before that. And, we ended up staying in the house, sleeping on the floor in sleeping bags. And,
the fact that Chris wasn't there and didn't know about it. That's
Chris wasn't there. Chris was out of town.
This guy's like, man, this guy is way too involved in my life, and I don't know. But he seems like a really down-to-earth, fun cat.
Yeah, he is.
Very humble.
This is the time of year where I get a lot of guitar signed, because the True West presents promoters in town.
Yeah.
They let me come up to the zoo to any of the shows to get guitar signed. Also work with the guys at Monkey, Mike Quinn over there. We look at the schedule beforehand, and I send out guitars with him, and they get guitar signed for me. We've been able to get people like, the Culture Club, Willie Nelson, Steve Miller, Peter Frampton. Summertime is really, really good for getting guitars. And we'll put these guitars in our auction, and the money from that will go to scholarships and our music education program. We have this music education program that happens in schools around the states that don't have music programs. And the violinist, Aaron Meyer, he will go into these schools, and he usually goes through K through 6 schools. And it exposes kids, many of them for the very first time, to music and to instruments. And he'll show the different things that a violin can do. And he's very diverse. He can play rock, classical, jazz. I mean, he's all over the place.
Yep. Great communicator. He relates well with kids. So he lights that fire with students and really helps them discover a passion for music that they may not have had. I've been in a bunch of his music in the schools programs, and personally, like Caleb, my oldest son, the first time he ever played drums in front of somebody was at one of Aaron Meyer's events at his elementary school. He got up to jam with Aaron, and I still have that video. It meant a lot to me, but that was about 11 or 12 years ago. And I think that all those kids at that point, they're so malleable, they're so impressionable. And if they've got an influence like that at an early age, they can develop a love for music and an appreciation for artists, even if they don't want to play music, but they can appreciate it. You're sort of paving the way for people to support music as time goes on.
Yeah, those kids aren't jaded at this time, and they,
right,
they they have they haven't totally formed all their ideas. Uh, you know, when you get up into high school, I only like this kind of music.
right.
People get into these little focused kind of things, and I can remember going out to the first musical event that we did, Capitol Hill High School, just off of Twilliger Boulevard, and
Yeah.
seeing these kids watch. At that time, we had Dan Ballmer, Carlton Jackson,
Oh, man.
uh, George Mitchell on piano,
Right.
and they they went through what each instrument did, and then they played together, and they got down to the end, and they turned to the principal of the school, and they goes, "Is it okay if the kids dance?" And they played this jazz piece, and the kids were out there on the floor, and they were all
Ah,
doing their own kind of movements to what this music was, um, and it was amazing to see.
yeah.
And it, you know, music is probably one of the most powerful things in the world.
Yeah.
Um, it's one of those things that you can communicate in any kind of language with music. Um, and in times even like right now with, COVID-19, music is helping a lot of people get through this.
Yeah.
We've been doing this curbside pickup stuff here. And I tell you, a lot of our customers are very appreciative of it because, it's given them a bright moment in their day, to happen to stay home
Yeah.
on a regular basis for 2 or 3 months worth of time.
Yeah, that's the truth. It really is. It transcends so many boundaries, and with this time, people need the escape, right? They really need uplifting opportunities, and so music, for me, I mean, it saved my life through other trying times, right? As a troubled teen, and going through all sorts of lifetime struggles as an adult. It's the one thing that it's a constant. You always have that go-to music that you can listen to kind of pick your spirits up, and being able to play music is one thing, but having it there to you think you're always thinking about your first kiss, and what was playing in the background, or the songs that were played at your wedding, or the songs that were formative, and your early teens when you discovered all sorts of things about life. Music was a soundtrack for that, right? So I think it's neat to see this new discovery from younger people. I've heard you talk a lot about youth really being into vinyl now. And
Yeah, and I tell you that the vinyl thing has been really, really uh, a turnaround for how people experience music. Um, you know, Vinyl is probably the closest thing to the sound of vinyl is probably the closest thing to being in a live music situation. It's got a warmth to it. And I think people treat it more like art than they did CDs or
yeah,
cassettes. Um, you know, you got to treat your vinyl very nice. You walk up to the turntable, you take the record out of the sleeve, you carefully put it on the turntable, you carefully put the arm on there. And in many cases, people will go back to their sitting situation in front of their stereo with the album cover, and while they're listening to the record, they're just absorbing this album cover.
yeah,
Um, the art on the front, the liner notes. Um, when when I first got into vinyl and stuff, and I started listening to things on a turntable, and sitting there, I knew, you know, all the guest artists on the record, the executive producer, the engineers, and you know, those things were really important to me when I was picking other records, because I would see a record out there and I go, oh, that guy's, Andy Powell from Wishbone Ash is playing on this Renaissance record. I might want to check this out.
Yeah.
And I found a lot of records that first couple of years from just reading those album covers. Because I didn't know anything about music, this is an interesting story. When I was working at DJ Sound City at Jansen Beach, about 3 weeks into working at the store, I started going out with one of the girls in the store, and then about 3 weeks later, she goes, "I got a surprise for you tonight," and I had other took me to Music Millennium. That was my surprise, and
Wow.
I was in it, and I'm going, wow, they got all this import music that we don't have in our store. And so I started going to Music Millennium like 3 or 4 nights a week.
Wow.
Our
Yeah.
store closed at 9 o'clock. I could get to Millennium by 9:15 and have 45 minutes till they closed to read album covers back to back.
Oh my
And I think that first year I bought 665 records.
Oh my God.
And yeah, I lived at home. Um, I got out of school at noon. I could work 40 hours a week. Um, so I didn't have any bills,
Yeah.
and I could spend all my money on music. And so I bought all those records, but I'd say about half those records were bought without hearing those records, just by looking at the album covers,
Oh,
reading the liner notes, and having an association with things. And then there were certain album covers that just jumped off the wall into my hand because the cover looked so cool. I got to
totally.
try this out. And luckily, most of them were good.
Yeah.
You did run into some bummers sometimes.
I have a handful, yeah, that I still have, even though those records didn't work out, but the art was great. And
Oh, yeah.
a really good friend of mine that I'm interviewing in a few days, Luke Duran, is the art director for Montana Outdoors magazine.
Uh,
But he was a Portland guy for a while. He was playing Gravity Frog. He used to sell some CDs there at Millennium. He's got an Instagram channel and I think a Facebook group called Album Art Love. And it's all about sharing record covers that are, like really well crafted or artistic. And it's one of those fascinating things you go through and because it brings you back to all these records that were just incredible covers, right? And even if you didn't like a band's genre, you'd still get off on the artwork, but do you remember your first record?
my first two records I bought was at a place called Whitefront, and they were in a bargain bin. And a friend of mine had turned me on to a record um, that his older brother owned. And it was "We're Only in It for the Money" by Frank Zappa and the Mothers of
Oh
Invention.
my God, your first record was Zappa.
So
Great.
my first two records were in this bargain bin, was that record and another record Frank Zappa did called "Cruising with Ruben and the Jets."
Wow, that's good start.
But back to the kids and
Yeah.
vinyl these
Yep.
days
Sorry. Thank you.
is, when we got in the CD era, it seems like people got very genre oriented and, I like rock, I like soul, I like dance music, I like country music. But when the youth population got back into vinyl, they would come in and they would buy some things that, you would expect them to buy. But they started looking through those budget bins and stuff, at the cheap records and stuff. And they bought a lot of records because of the album covers. So I'll see somebody coming in and buying a record by a new band called the 1975.
Right.
And then I'll see them with a couple other records in their hand. And it could be a classical record, a jazz record, a blues record, or a rock record. So that's been really good for opening the ears of the youth population to the grandiose scale of what music is made around.
So sorry. I have a contractor outside and my dog, pardon me for a second. I'm going to mute my.
Dog.
Sorry about that, buddy. I'm going to just have someone let the dog out. Sorry. like you mentioned, like, so these kids would get this eclectic mix from the artwork, from the budget bin. And I've heard you talk about that influence that they've had from parents and grandparents, right? So they get turned on by maybe an
Oh
old,
yeah, a lot of people discovered vinyl by, going into their parents' or grandparents' basement and, seeing a box of records or seeing a rack of records, seeing a turntable that hadn't been used in a number of years, and, um, you know, starting talking about that. And especially when vinyl started to take off again, um, parents and grandparents, um, I think those kids looked at them in a different way, like, oh, my dad's pretty cool. Oh,
yeah,
grandfather's pretty cool. And I started seeing grandparents and kids and parents and kids coming into the record store and shopping together. And that really didn't happen during the CD era at all.
yeah,
I mean, you got up in your teens, you kind of wanted to distance yourself from your parents.
yeah,
Parents listen to one kind of music, you listen to another. Now I'm seeing, these people come in together, and you're seeing 13, 14-year olds buying AC/DC or
right.
Pink Floyd or Fleetwood Mac records. Um, the kind of records their parents or their grandparents listen to, and they can share this music in common with each other.
Yeah, that's a remarkable thing. Really, no one would ever expect that teenagers would want to listen to what their parents were listening to, or even
No, if
admit
you
it.
look at 1972 when I started working in a record store, um, and then you looked at, in relation to, somebody today buying Dark Side of the Moon. Dark Side of the Moon came out in 1973.
Right.
That's 47 years ago. And in 1972, when I started working in a record store, you know, that taken me back to the 1930s.
Oh,
There was
yeah.
nobody in my generation listening to music in the 1930s at that
No,
time, or the 1940s, and just rock and roll in the 1950s.
right. Oh man. Yeah. Well, it's interesting that has sort of this generational thing has come around, because you mentioned right now people buying Dark Side of the Moon as a performer playing with this band that was really known for the biggest hit in '81. The As we're out on tour, I see three different generations of people at our shows now, and it blows my mind. I'll see 13-year-old kids rocking out to Iran, and they know the song from video games or movies. Their parents and grandparents had bought the records back in the day, and so
Good record, by the way.
you know what? I'm really blessed to be in a band that was, um, it was a really, it's a voice for that generation, and it's an opportunity for people to escape, because the '80s were a nice, maybe superficial, sort of vapid time in our life, but right now we kind of need the escape. So if they can't get out and see these live shows, listening to those records brings them back to a time that was a lot easier. you
No,
know
there was a lot of good music made in the 80s. I think that the 80s get a bad rap in the way that um, MTV changed music.
Yep.
Um, and uh, all of a sudden, imagery was used to portray what a song meant. Up till that time, I'd hear a song by Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, like Wooden Ships or Woodstock or whatever, and you formulated these visions in your own brain of what that song was about. In the 80s, there was a lot of music that was just like, portrayed. There was a lot of fast cars,
Right.
scantily clad women. So the imagery from that 80s kind of gives it the bad rap.
Yeah.
But man, it was a really inventive time. I can still remember hearing the first Culture Club album, or hearing Men at Work,
Hmm.
um, or bands like Midnight Oil. And I mean, uh, lot of those artists are still active
Yeah.
today,
Right.
and some of those artists are still making new music, which is really exciting too.
Yep.
They're just not resting on, their old hits.
It's nice to see. I really love that we travel with a lot of these bands from that era that are still out there working it, still putting out music, and they don't take it for granted. They appreciate the fact that people are still supportive. They're still buying records. They're still buying tickets to go to shows. They're still traveling to come out and hang out with us. And so for me, I've developed a whole new series of friends, because I'm such a fan of the genre and of the bands anyway. And then I'm lucky because I get to go play on stage. But I am so grateful that there are supportive fans that still like that era, And there are festivals and
Yeah, and
week-long getaways, that are just dedicated to 80s fans, right?
oh, no, 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 no. There's cruises and getaways like that. And, I mean, I talk to people that go out on classic rock cruises, and, there'll be 15, 20 different bands there. And it's like the greatest vacation they ever had.
Yep, it's true. We're on it again. 80s cruise in February. We'll be out there, cruising through the Caribbean, and it's so nice to be able to connect with friends. The bands all become like it's a family reunion, but all these buddies that you make that are fans of the band, they become friends. They're not fans to me or to us, but they become sort of lifelong connections because they continue not only the 80s cruises, but there's the 80s in the Sand event that I've done in the Dominican Republic the last few years, and
Yeah.
now they're moving it to Cancun this October. And it's a week-long thing with dozens of bands and all sorts of things wrapped around the genre that make it an experience. And it's it is kind of like the experience you'd have walking into a record store back in the 80s. You'd have the nostalgia and the swag and the smells and the looks and all that. But
Oh, yeah.
I think you know one concern I always had, for Music Millennium was watching each wave of adversity come in. Whenever digital downloads started, the Napster thing started happening, and I thought, man, how are my favorite record stores going to stay in business? And I know you saw so many changes and learned to adapt and shift, and really,
It's it's been an adventure. Um, it really has. I came to Music Millennium in '84. And as I told you before, I was a great customer of Music Millennium previous to that. In '84, Music Millennium, um, the middle ownership was going to file bankruptcy.
hmm,
And the original owner, who had it from '69 to '79, decided to assume $500,000 in debt, the building and what was left of the inventory, and go into the future. And that's when I got an opportunity to come over here. And we were lucky for the next, all the way up until Napster. Uh, we we saw increases in business in the store. Everything seemed to be really good. When Napster came along, um, we saw the beginning of the slide. Uh, in the early 2000s to 2007. In fact, in 2007, when our lease was up at our second location, it became pretty evident that I shouldn't sign a long-term lease because, rent was going to continue to go up, but for the last 7 years, business had went down, and I could have dragged the whole company down had I got myself stuck in a lease like that. So we decided to consolidate to one store. Um, and then in 2007, a very interesting thing happened. Um, Vinyl had pretty much been gone from most record stores for years. We continued to have a section of it. We had a, used record section, but there was these little tiny indie alternative rock labels that would put out 45s and occasionally albums. Um, Labels like Sub Pop in Seattle would still put out vinyl, and we would bring these things in. Um, But in 2007, the three coalitions that were out there got together and talked about having a special day that was devoted to vinyl. And what we did was go to the industry and goes, we'd really like to have this day called Record Store Day, kind of to celebrate the record stores that are out there. And would you make some compelling, unique vinyl for us to sell on that day? And I think they kind of just felt like they were going to throw us a bone and goes, yeah, we'll do that, you know, because nobody else cared about vinyl, you know, the big box retailers, Amazon, nobody cared about vinyl at all. And so we had this special day. We hired a publicist, a national publicist, and he sent out a press release that said, you know, there was going to be this day, but it also enforced out there that there was still 1,800 record stores out there. And guess what? They have records.
Right.
And the media between 2000 and 2007, as it got closer to 2007, kept painting a picture that record stores were on the outs and they were going to go away for good. There wasn't going to be record stores in the future. So this pivotal point right there changed the future of the record industry. It was a very successful day. There was 50 releases that day. Last year, there was 450 unique releases that came out on Record Store Day.
Wow.
Record Store Day has become the biggest day for independent record stores in the United States. You know, in many cases, it's 3 times bigger than any day in the month of December.
Wow.
It's really a phenomenon. But as the years have progressed since 2007 in Record Store Day, so has the audience for buying vinyl. And it is so great to go out on Record Store Day and look out my door at 6 o'clock in the morning when I arrive, and you know there's 100 or 200 people in line. Many of them have been in line all night long.
Right.
Some have sleeping bags, and I mean, what vinyl means to them is pretty immense.
Yeah. And you've done an amazing job of you blew out that extra wall. You expanded your store to an amazing collection of vinyl. You've got an entirely new store that's just vinyl next door.
In the last week, we did some CD consolidation in the store because CDs have been shrinking.
Sure.
Both the demand for CDs and the amount of CDs that are available these days, as the record companies have cut out titles and made them non-available. And you know, we made a little extra room in the store for vinyl because we're really packed to the max with vinyl. And because we haven't been doing a lot of business the last 2.5 months, but I've had a little extra time, I've been trying to fill in as many holes as I can in the inventory. So the bins are really packed right now. One of the things we faced this last year is the 3 major distribution companies in our industry, Sony, Universal, and WEA, that they all use a third-party distribution warehouse. And when WEA went into that distribution warehouse, distribution all kind of fell apart. We used to get product from them, usually take like 7 or 8 days to get here. Product started taking 3 or 4 weeks to get here. Fills on our orders started dipping below 50%, where before we were able to get about 95% of the product we get. So a lot of holes existed in our inventory. I have went through all the majors catalogs multiple times in the last year and tried to reorder things. And then crazy things came up, like the Warner Brothers record label lost the right to their logo. which was the WB
Yeah.
shield that's on the back, like Warner Brothers Pictures, Warner Brothers Records. And when they did, when that expired somehow, they had to redo the artwork for all that stuff with a new logo in order to put it out. So that's postponed many releases from being able to see the light of day again.
Oh my God. Wow. I didn't even know. I had not even heard about that. That's like losing a domain, but much more extreme because you have to reprint all that work. Oh, just another speed bump to have
Yeah,
to jump. Yeah. Yeah. Um, Gosh, Terry, I think, when I announced that publicly that you and I were going to be talking, a lot of people in the local community started getting excited because people that, engineers, John Neff said, Terry's such a good guy. And Marty Hughley, like the most prominent music writer, in the area, talked about one of the greatest humans I know. The uh, the amount of work that you've done it's not been self-serving that you've done reputation management or anything like that. You really have given this community something that so many businesses are really just out to kind of just make a buck, and at the end of the day it's just about sort of taking care of their own. But you really have given back, and I love seeing the community kind of rally right now, being able to do whatever we can to help support this. And you're still, even this pandemic, you're still trying to help the venues and these artists make something happen. Uh, I think, if there's anything more that people can do, will certainly help promote getting the phone number out there, put the email address that people can sign up for these special um, um, shopping hours. But I would love to know that people, are still involved in helping Music Millennium come back to life at the end of this pandemic. And really, right now, transfer your buying power from your Amazon orders, go through Music Millennium, get your orders in there. Because I think you've done so much, man. It's really time right now, I think, for people to be able to give back. Yeah, I love your generosity. I think you really are one of my most treasured humans. It,
well,
it
thank you. And it takes a whole community to do all this. I'm not doing this by myself. There's a lot of people out in our community that care about the artists, the the whole music scene in general, and um, you know whatever anybody can do to help this community is a great thing, all the way down to the music fans. I mean, there's a couple of music fans. They're retired. They they go to a show at least every day.
yeah,
Not at this moment, but
right.
when they can. The last couple of years, they've seen over 400 or 500 artists per year. They'll stop over at Music Millennium for an in-store, go over to the Laurel Hearst and see a show there, and then hit a venue at night and see another concert. And
Yeah.
I will watch these people, you know, buy merchandise from these artists and help support them. And those are things that people can do right now. There's a lot of artists out of work out there. They can't work.
Yeah.
Is if people can go to these artists' websites too, you know, buy a T-shirt, you know, buy some kind of merchandise. That kind of stuff can go a long, long way. I mean, we do consignment product with a lot of local artists. Anybody can bring their stuff by the store and we pay them as we sell them.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of artists that have been starving artists that, hey, could I get paid for my 2 CDs? I go, no problem at all. So anything that anybody can do is going to be a big help.
Yeah. That's great, man. I love that you do it. And I really encourage anybody that's out there watching, um, spread the news, use social media to kind of let people know that these are opportunities right now to help the community, to help the artists, to help these venues, and truly, put some energy into making sure that Music Millennium is alive and kicking. June 1st, you said you open up your doors
Yeah,
again.
June 1st is when we're going to open up. And You know, I'm hoping sooner than later that we're going to get to see live music happen in this town again, and we can
Please.
go back out and we can support the local artists as well as the national artists. Um, my bank card statement keeps getting refunds for all the tickets that I bought for the future and the shows that have been canceled, and it's sad to see, but I've been really proud of this town for what we've done during this virus,
Me too.
and curbing it to where we didn't have a big epidemic here like
Right.
some parts of the country. So thank you, Portland.
Yeah, absolutely. Jason Fellman and Dan Bozick and I talked quite a bit about the different organizations that can help the independent music community and these venues. So in so doing, I'll promote those links again. I'll post those in here. But whatever you can do to help support the community, Terry Currier, Music Millennium. Man, I can't tell you how much I appreciate this, and it's so good to see your face. I miss you. I miss Karen.
It's good to see you too. It's been a little while, you know. We've
We're due.
kind of been here in lockdown.
You, me, and Mike Skill. We're due for some lunch again. You know.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm
God.
looking forward to that day.
Since I can't do it, will you please give Karen a squeeze for me, and then have her give one back to you?
I sure will.
Please do,
You
man.
take care. Good to see you, Kevin.
I love you, buddy. Thank you so much, man. All right.
Take care.
Talk to you soon.
Bye now.